Wonder Indines powers activate. Form of the creator of Battle Guides. Join me on this episode of Battle Guides featuring Kehrolyn. Kehrolyn is a stat monster who makes use of her amazing unique ability to double down on her good stats and amazing effects. However, that all comes at the cost of being predictable, having little to no movement, and being easily card locked. Kehrolyn's unique ability is called Shape-Shifting. Kehrolyn's first discard style is called her current form. Her current form is then applied to every attack that she plays, meaning that all of her attacks have at least 2 styles on them. As an added note, remember that these current forms still apply to her Overdrive finishers. Now, this unique ability is quite interesting because of the way it works. Basically, it's a long-winded way of saying that when you play a style, that style still applies to your next attack. And this is very powerful because it allows you to basically have 2 styles worth of stats and effects at any given moment. This means that Kehrolyn's average stat line and average number of effects might seem pretty low given her base styles, but note that you can play 2 of them per turn, which means that you have a ton of stats and a ton of effects. This also allows you to be quite versatile, as if a specific style totally shuts down an opponent, say a speedster who only deals 2 damage, well, playing anything with soak doesn't only give you soak for that beat, but also for the next one, which means that you can capitalize on your opponent's weaknesses way more often. And aside from that, if your opponent does have some ways around your effects, and say that you do miss on this turn, don't worry, you can still use that style during the next beat. So if you whiff your big payout attack, don't worry, you have a chance again next beat. Now, one tip I can give all of you with Kehrolyn is that starting discards are very important. Now, not to say that starting discards aren't important for any other characters, but it's especially true for Kehrolyn. Whereas most characters only care about starting discards because they want to have specific styles in their hand, Kehrolyn has another level because she wants a specific style to be in discard 1. Depending on which opponents she faces and what the starting positions on the board are, depending on the play mode you're playing or whatever, you may want different styles to be in your discard 1 so that you can take advantage of them on turn 1. So say that you're fighting against an opponent who may have a lot of retreat effects or may have a lot of ways of getting away from you. Perhaps putting Whip into your discard 1 might be very, very beneficial to you. Now, this just means that you need to have a lot of knowledge about matchups as well as a lot of knowledge about what your opponent's character can do. So, in order to capitalize on Kehrolyn the most, the biggest tip I can give is to simply play more games as her or any other character in the game, because knowledge of that is crucial to playing a character like Kehrolyn. Let's start off with Bladed. Bladed is technically a big payout style because it gives Kehrolyn a lot of power. But that technically isn't true because it's really consistent on its own. It deals +2 damage with Stun Guard 2, which is very good in conjunction with Strike and Shot because it brings it above Magical Stun Guard 3. That's not to mention all the interactions it can have with all her other styles, but we'll go over those things later on. Basically, if you feel like you need to deal a lot of damage as Kehrolyn or you want to break through your opponent's stun guard, playing Bladed is a very good way to pressure your opponent because not only do you get the power and stun guard this turn, but you get it during the next turn as well. Now, if any of your attack pairs have Bladed in them, be that because you played Bladed or Bladed is in your discard 1, I highly suggest pairing that attack with Shots or Strikes in order to bring the stun guard above Magical Stun Guard 3. As an added note, Bladed also works very well when you pair it with Exoskeleton because it brings you above Magical Stun Guard 3 without any base. This means that you can play almost any base with it, be that a drive or a shot or whatever. Speaking of Exoskeleton, Exoskeleton is a defensive style that gives Kehrolyn no stats, but no penalties, but it has Soak 2, which is very, very good when it comes to trading. And it also has a really good passive effect that allows you to ignore movement effects applied to you by the opponent. This means that if you've cornered your opponent, playing an Exoskeleton is oftentimes a really good way to make them completely scared. Because not only can they not move you, you have Soak too, so it's very hard to stun you. And even if they do try to stun you and, you end up trading, you'll almost oftentimes trade positively against them because you have Soak too, which is amazing. Now, as mentioned before, Exoskeleton works very, very well with Bladed because it gives you power, it gives you magical stun guard 3 without any base. But Exoskeleton on its own can be played in a variety of situations, mostly in order to counter your opponent's grasp, or when you're up against speedsters who deal little to no damage on a regular basis. Now when it comes to attack pairs, this thing pairs very well with Shot because of the range and the magical stun guard 3, don't forget about that, but it also pairs very well with Kehrolyn's Strike because of, again, the same reasons. The stun guard gives you above magical stun guard 3, and one thing is that Exoskeleton cancels out Strike's biggest weakness, Grasp. Next up is Whip. If you thought Kehrolyn lacked range, Whip will make you think otherwise. Now, Whip might not seem very impressive. It only has range plus 0 to 1. But this is amazing if you consider the fact that Whip gets applied to your next attack as well. Meaning that when you play Whip, you gain bonus range over 2 turns, which is really, really good on a character who can threaten you a lot when you're in melee range. Note that Whip is also very interesting because of the on-hit effect. On the on-hit, if the opponent is at range 1, they're stunned. Then, otherwise, you pull them 1 space. This is very peculiar because why would you do something like Whip if you're already in melee? But if you think about it this way, when you play Whip on this turn, you pull them if they're not in melee. Then the next turn, you still have Whip activated because it's your current form, meaning that you now threaten to stun them when you hit. This makes Whip very, 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 very good, especially since Kehrolyn doesn't have a lot of movement, which means that her hit confirm is a bit lacking sometimes. This is very powerful when used in conjunction with any of our other styles. Again, because range is just that good, it synergizes with almost anything. Bladed, Exoskeleton, and Quicksilver all benefit a lot from this because simply put, those things don't do much if you don't get to hit the opponent, making Whip one of Kehrolyn's strongest styles when it comes to dealing with opponents. Now, remember that although it only has weak stats, you still get the benefits from your current form. So, since all of her other styles are just monstrous stat boosts, this isn't as bad as it seems. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly suggest pairing this thing with Drive, because Drive lets you go in and stun opponents without them, seeing it before you play it. Or, if you want, you can also do Grasp, because it allows you to grasp them near and then stun them with the on-hit effect. Next up is Quicksilver, and it lives to its name because it gives Kehrolyn priority plus 2 without any power penalties. This is a recurring theme with Kehrolyn. Notice how she gets stat monster stats, but almost none of the stat monster penalties. She has lots of power plus, but no priority penalties. She has lots of priority penalties, but no power penalties. This makes Kehrolyn's just average stat line monstrous. And it's very scary, especially when trying to deal with her if you're like a middler or somebody who doesn't have a lot of stats of their own, which makes Kehrolyn quite scary. Now, Quicksilver is very, very good because it makes Kehrolyn really fast. If the opponent doesn't have a lot of stun guard, Kehrolyn can wreck you by just being really fast, dealing lots of damage over 2 turns. Remember, over 2 turns is the big thing here. Playing this style technically gives you priority plus 4 over 2 turns. So that's really, really good, especially when coupled with the end of beat effect that you get to repeat twice, letting you get nearer to the opponent since Kehrolyn is mostly a melee-oriented character. That being said, Quicksilver just synergizes with everything because, again, priority allows you to hit the opponent or at least attempt to hit the opponent before they attempt to hit you. This means that you may be able to avoid your opponent's on-hit effects that allow them to dodge, or even their before activating effects that allow them to dodge. That being said, it synergizes with almost all of her styles because, again, She just really benefits from going first and hitting the opponent often. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly recommend pairing this thing with Drive because it gives you the much needed hit confirm you need, and a priority 6 Drive is pretty hard to deal with. Now, if your opponent is in the corner or if they have no way of retreating or dodging you, pairing this with a Grasp allows you to be even faster and potentially outspeed your opponent's fastest attack no matter how hard they try. Now, Mutating is the black sheep of this kit because it's not a stat monster style. Instead, it gives Kehrolyn more stats. So this is the weird thing about it. On reveal, this style basically copies your current form. And if it is your current form, it copies the style you played. Effectively, it means that you can double down on any of your other styles, which is possibly devastating because if you look at all of our other styles, they're stat monster styles. Now, if you double up on them, they're stat god styles. Bladed power plus 2 stun guard 2? No, it's now power plus 4 stun guard 4. Do I need to say more? Exoskeleton becomes soak 4. Whip gets you 0 to 2 range, which makes all of your attacks magical range because it's range 1 to 3 for magical range. But not only that, but you double up on the on-hit effect, which means that you can possibly stun someone on the turn that you play this. And finally, you have Quicksilver. Priority plus 4 for no power penalties. You can beat almost a dash with it. You can almost beat a dash with it. If not, you can at least clash a dash with it. That's insane. And of course, the 2 end beat effects allow you to get nearer to your opponent and adjust for positioning so that you get the advantage the next turn. Basically, Mutating is very good because it allows you to double up on any of your styles, and all of your styles are pretty good on their own. However, it does have one big drawback in that you end up losing 1 life each time you use the Mutating. But realize that Mutating is going to become your current form the next beat, which means that playing Mutating once actually forces you to lose 2 life. Now, this might not seem like a lot, but if your opponent dashes a majority of your attacks, or if they're able to dodge you often enough, you oftentimes just play nothing and do nothing to lose 2 life, which isn't worth it in this game because unlike many other games, life is super important. So remember that when playing Mutating, it's basically your big payout attack. You're betting it all in order to double up on one style and whack the opponent hard. Now this is very powerful, and it really depends on which style is your current form or which style you're planning to play if Mutating is your current form. That being said, I can't give you guys any recommended, bases because this thing is just copy whatever other style you play. Which means that if you're planning to play Mutating, look at the other style and then copy whatever base that style is usually good with. Otherwise, Mutating is just really powerful, but be very careful of the drawback of losing life. And finally, we have Kehrolyn's unique base, Overload. It's a range 1, power 3, priority 3 attack, which is kind of mediocre. It also loses priority ties. That makes it worse. But why? Why do you ask? Is it so mediocre or bad? Because the start of beat effect is kind of broken. You see, I've always sung praises about cards that allow you to see your opponent's attack pair and then do something in order to adjust anything in your attack pair so that you can react to them. Stuff like Arek's Perceptional, Hikaru's Geomantic, heck, even Runica's Artifact Avarice. All have that in common. They get to see their opponent's attack and then react to it by playing another artifact, a token, or whatever. Overload does that, but with Kehrolyn's styles. Now if that doesn't shock you or make you scared, I don't know what will. Because when you play Overload, you get to reveal an extra style from your hand and then have it apply to your current attack. Which means that you have 3 styles on 1 attack, and it's as awesome as it sounds. You get to see your opponent's attack pair, react to them, and then have your thing just apply, and then you'll be able to wreck your opponent. Let's say that you played a fast attack, and your opponent played an attack that ended up being faster. What do you do now? Well, if you had played Overload, you can now put Exoskeleton onto your attack pair and just soak up the attack, not care, and then whack them back for whatever damage. Heck, you can do the same thing with Bladed. Or what if your opponent ended up bursting away from you and you needed the extra range? Well, a Whipped will solve all your problems. Do note that this base is really powerful, but with those 3 styles. However, there's a special case involving Quicksilver, because Quicksilver only gives you priority technically, and this thing still allows you to get that priority, but then it doesn't matter once start to beat starts, since active player has already been determined. So don't think that you can use Overload to get priority. Now another special case is just using it with Mutating. Now overloading into a Mutating is really good if the current form that you have was good to begin with. It basically allows you to double down on an opponent's mistake. If your opponent plays an attack pair and your current form was able to benefit you a lot, or if doubling up on your current form allows you to break through their stun guard or pull them in for extra stuns, it's very, very powerful. Just note that, again, you still lose the life from doing that. Now, when it comes to attack pairs, I highly can't really recommend a lot of stuff for this. Again, mostly because it's based on the situation that you're in. Especially because whatever you pair with this attack technically doesn't matter, since you can reveal a new card once Start of Beat starts and then gain the stats from that style. So you're basically just playing so many styles on this thing that you might as well be playing all of them on this thing. So I can't really recommend anything to you. But one special mention is using Quicksilver with this card if you need the priority to begin with. Because again, you can't reveal Quicksilver using the Start of Beat effect to gain the priority, because it doesn't matter at that point. So if you want a specific recommendation, I highly recommend pairing it with Quicksilver in order to gain the priority. Kehrolyn's 2 Overdrive finishers are Hydrophoric and the August Strain. Hydrophoric is just a big finisher attack. It'll hit the opponent for magical range, magical power, but really low speed. But it does have stun immunity, which is way more than magical stun card 3. Now, after activating, you do gain 5 life. So basically, whether you hit your opponent or not, you heal up 5 life, which is a lot in this game because that can save you at least 1 or 2 beats from dying, which is very, very good. I really prefer this Overdrive finisher because if your opponent's not careful with you, you can whack them and gain an 11-point life difference, which is amazing considering that you're Kehrolyn and you can basically mess people up really hard with all of your styles and stuff. Now, if that's not your cup of tea, if you think this is too unwieldy for you, maybe the August Strain is more your thing. The August Strain is a close to mid-range attack that doesn't deal a lot of damage. It's decently fast, but it does have Soak and Stun Guard, which means that it's above Magical Stun Guard 3. Now, when this works, you can set aside one of your styles, and then that will apply to all your attacks for the rest of the game, which basically means that you can pick one style to be a second current form for the rest of the game, which is very, very powerful because it means that your average amount of styles per play is now 3, and when you overload it becomes 4. So you become mega amazing because you will deal a lot of damage to your opponent. But remember, make sure you have enough beats to make this work for you, because if you die the next turn or the turn after that, getting the extra styles isn't that useful. Now, as a note, remember in her unique ability, her current form still apply to her Overdrive finishers, which means that you can wreck things really hard. And if you find that the Overdrive finisher has too little soak or too little range, you can easily adjust that by playing a card first, then overdriving, because that card becomes your current form, and then you can overdrive with that bonus. Now, when it comes to using a special action card, if you feel like your overdrive finishers aren't powerful enough, you can use it on a cancel because it allows you to get rid of your opponent's pesky options, and as a character with not a lot of hit confirm or not a lot of movement, it's very, very crucial to get rid of your opponent's bursts and grasps and dashes. And when it comes to using Pulse, that's also very good if your opponent has gotten so many 1 beats that they're super far away from you. Because again, as Kehrolyn, you barely have any range or hit confirm. So you can use this to bring them closer to you and corner them. Let's move on to the part that everybody loves. Kehrolyn Advanced Strategies and Combos. Kehrolyn Advanced Strategies can be separated into 3 easy things. Number 1, resource management. Number 2, predictability. And number 3, bluffing. Number 1, resource management. Now as Kehrolyn, whenever you play a style, remember that that's also part of your attack pair the next beat. Which means that when you play a style, you have to make sure that it'll also be useful to you during the next beat and not just this one. Though I can't really give you situations right now because that would involve giving you a lot of examples. Just note that playing many games will allow you to see what I mean. Just make sure that when you play something, it's not just for this beat, but it's also set up for the next beat. Aside from this, since you're easily card locked, let's say if your opponent's already far away from you and you ended up playing an Exoskeleton, your Exoskeleton will do nothing. It'll do nothing to help you. So it'll be very easy to card lock as Kehrolyn because if your opponent dodges you enough, you'll have no way of hitting them at certain ranges. So be very careful when playing your whip and Quicksilver because these are your only ways of closing the gap outside of using bases. So be very, very, very careful when using them and manage them well to keep your opponents close where you love them. And by love them, I mean totally destroy. Now, number 2, predictability. This is one of Kehrolyn's main weaknesses and it's something you have to mitigate if you want to be a good Kehrolyn player. Your opponent sees your current form all the time. All the time. Which means that they have some inkling as to what you can possibly do during that beat. Now this might not seem like a lot because your style that you play is still not visible to them. So you're like a regular character. But remember that this still makes you biased to do certain moves specifically. For example, you have a Quicksilver as your current form. You're therefore less incentivized to use Burst because Burst has no use for that extra priority that you gain. How about in a situation where you have Whip? You wouldn't usually use a shot with Whip when you're already this near to each other, right? Because it's just doubling down on stats that you don't need. Now this might not seem big, but it's really big in high-level situations. Your opponent can read you very well because of certain biases and certain things that will make you just want to optimize your plays. Basically, by seeing part of your attack, your opponent can easily cut down which cards you wouldn't want to play with that. And that's very dangerous. I'm telling you to not fall into that. Don't fall into that trap because that's how you lose with Kehrolyn. Your opponent's guessing your optimal play every beat is very easy to do when you're Kehrolyn because of the fact that they can see one of your styles. So don't let your style always dictate what attack you'll be playing. If your current form has range, don't let that stop you from using a shot because sometimes this ignoring of your current form can spell the difference between winning or losing. Because even if you only do it once every 3 beats, wherein you ignore your current form and just play as if you didn't have one, your opponent won't be able to guess what you're doing. Because if you do it every single beat, your opponent will see the pattern and he'll just wreck you. But if you change it up from time to time, they won't see it coming. So remember that when playing as Kehrolyn. Now, number 3, bluffing. This ties in with number 2 and it's pretty easy. Basically, your current form influences the way your opponent tries to play around you because they see part of your attack. Use this as a bluff. For example, you can have the Bladed there and your opponent will go like, oh no, he's going to be really offensive this turn. And then you dash. So your opponent wastes their defensive thing on a dash. Or better yet, they waste your dash on a dash. Simple as that. So bluffing is a great way in order to prevent yourself from becoming predictable, as well as possibly making your opponent waste their options. Now let's move on to some Kehrolyn combos, and these will be the most intense thing you'll ever see. Number 1 is Bladed Shot. Just a bunch of range, magical stun guard 4 deals 5 damage, and that's without your current form. If you want to add some current forms to it, be my guest. Make it Mutating, make it Exoskeleton. Almost every current form is good with this, except maybe Quicksilver. So remember that Bladed Shot is one of your biggest things and you treat it like a clockwork shot because it's just that dangerous. Number 2, Quicksilver Overload. I mentioned this before, Quicksilver Overload is amazing. Not only is it fast, not only can you see your opponent's attack pair and then react, but it allows you to... No, basically that's it. And that is more than enough for me to justify that this is an amazing attack. This thing has technically all the stats. If you need range, Whip. If you need soak, Exoskeleton. If you need more power and or stun guard, Bladed. It's that simple. Just that simple. And that doesn't even consider your current form. Depending on what your current form is, it becomes even better. So, that being said, just make sure that you use this in a situation wherein the styles in your hand will benefit you when you see your opponent's attack pair. Because if your opponent is at maximum range from you and you play an overload, it will do nothing because you have no way of hitting the opponent if they're that far away from you. And finally, let's go with the nuts, the insanity, and that's Mutating Drive. Mutating Drive might not seem super powerful, but basically it's this. It allows you to double down on whatever your current form is on a drive, which is what I think to be one of the best bases for Kehrolyn, because it allows her to close the gap, which she really wants, because she has no range tools on her. Now, this is really insane, because depending on your current form, you can have one of the most monstrous attacks. You can have a whip, and then this thing becomes range 1 to 5 that can potentially stun the opponent. Bladed, power 7, stun guard 4, priority 4, range 1 to 3, super good. Exoskeleton, soak 4. You will not almost take damage to speed. How about Quicksilver? It's a priority 8 attack. Boom. Your opponent explodes because they just fear whatever your current form is. So that's really powerful, and you can use this attack to scare your opponents with your current form. It's one way of Kehrolyn bluffing, as I said, because it allows you to make them really scared of your current form, and they might go like, oh no, he has Bladed, I have to be defensive because he can Mutating me and wreck my day. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides. I hope you liked the episode. If you are interested in anything level 99 games related, or maybe BattleCon itself, check the description out below. Want to join our community, talk to other BattleCon veterans? Check the description out below. If you want to ask me questions, send me an email or write in the comment section down below, and I'll answer you as soon as I can. Without further ado, don't forget your special action, and thank you, World of Indines. Thank you, and good night.